Well, good evening and welcome to the Linklaters Commercial Awareness event coming live from their London office, and I'm delighted to be here with you. My name is Nadine Dereza and I'm your host for this evening. And to avoid any confusion, I don't actually work for Linklaters. I'm a business presenter and journalist, and it's my job tonight to chair the discussion here, and it's a great privilege to be here. Now, I'd like to congratulate our live audience who are with us tonight, who've been selected based on the questions that they submitted. Thank you very much for coming along and being part of our live programme. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome our online viewers. If you are watching online, don't forget to keep submitting your questions. You know the button, it's at the top of your screens, and we'll answer those questions at the end of the session. So do remember to stay online after. I'll give you some more details about that later on. So afterwards, when we've spoken to all the recruiters, we're also going to be having a great networking evening as well with our live audience as well. And I'm here tonight on behalf of Linklaters to ask some of the leading partners and associates some questions, and also to find out about their work and experiences to date. And we're focusing on the subject of commercial awareness. So what exactly is it? And we're going to find out why having a commercial perspective is so important for a successful lawyer, and also why Linklaters see it as a key aspect for their future development and global success. Now, when registering for this event, you're all asked to submit a question around the theme of commercial awareness. And tonight, you're going to be hearing 5 questions all around that. And they're going to be answered by our Linklaters panelists, who I'm going to be introducing to you shortly. It's all worth reminding you at this stage that the person who Linklaters thought asked the best question is going to win a competition, and the prize is amazing. Yes, it's a trip to Dubai, and we're going to announce the winner towards the end of the programme. So, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel to you for this evening, and welcome David Phillips, Tom Shropshire, Alex Badas, Alison Wilson, and Andrew Marshall. Please give them a big round of applause. Well, first of all, I'd like to introduce you to David Phillips, and David is a partner with Capital Markets. I think he specialises in structured capital market securities and derivative transactions. Sounds quite complicated. What exactly does your role involve?
Good evening. Generally, I will advise a range of investment banks, commercial banks, pension schemes and insurers on complex financial transactions which effectively achieve a financial result for each of that client type. I also, within the group, I am the group trainee solicitor partner for the DSP group, the Derivatives and Structured Products group within our capital markets, and that means that I effectively look after the trainees, so I'm quite approachable.
Okay. He is, honestly. And you've got quite a lot of international experience as well, haven't you? Where's the role taken you?
So with the firm, I've been in Hong Kong, I've been in Warsaw, I've been in New York, and I've travelled for actual work matters, but not actually been based overseas.
And sitting next to you is Tom Shropshire. Hopefully I've pronounced the surname correctly. It's the American way of saying it. He's a partner with corporate. I know your role focuses on mergers and acquisitions, equity capital markets. What's your role actually entail, Tom? Just give us an insight into it.
Sure. Well, I'm a New York admitted lawyer, and I've been practicing in London in European markets for about 15 years. So my role is principally advising our biggest corporate clients with respect to compliance with the U.S. laws, and also help them structure transactions, whether it be a merger, an acquisition, a joint venture. Also help them raise capital, whether that's for their own internal purposes or for acquisitions. And also I just provide an advisory practice, which is mainly a compliance-based practice, making sure that their operations are cognizant and acting in accordance with the U.S. rules.
And I know you're on the international board as well. So what does that role involve then? How much of your time is taken up with that?
That's broadly a role I describe as cat herding. All kidding aside, it's a role that there's about 14 members of the international board, 16 in total, and we're responsible for setting the strategic direction of the firm, as well as the governance of the firm around the world. And so it's a board that's consistent base of partners from around the world, given that responsibility, who work alongside our management committee in terms of designing, implementing, and seeing through the strategy and other matters facing the firm.
Thank you, Tom, and welcome to you. And sitting alongside you is Alex Baidas, who's the Managing Associate of Employment and Incentives. And this lady advises on all aspects of employee incentives. You may have seen her on television or heard her on the radio, because I know she's been doing quite a few media interviews lately. But I know your background is very diverse. It's not just around employment. Welcome to you, Alex.
Thank you. Yes, so I actually started in our corporate team, and I moved across to the employment and incentives team after about 6 years of practicing. And I tend to focus on advising banks, other corporates, energy companies, food and beverage companies and so on, how to structure pay and make sure they comply with all the rules on pay and the disclosure of pay. And it is a very big issue at the moment. It has been getting a lot of media coverage. I guess because of the market we're in, people are focusing on what people are paid. And so I have had the opportunity to be on television, and I've been interviewed for various newspapers as well. So it's been an interesting time.
It has indeed, and I suppose it's always a judgment call when the media do call you, because you're representing the firm and yourself. So how do you sort of decide whether to take on that media interview or not?
Well, at the moment I'm not doing it because we're advising a number of companies on these rules. But earlier on in the year, when all these rules were being developed by Europe, there were all sorts of discussions going on in Europe. Regulations were about to be published. And our clients were very, very keen to know what was going on. So we were very close to regulators and the lawmakers in Europe, mainly to help our clients, and that made us very expert in this area, so the press wanted to talk to us. And actually having that connection with the press was brilliant for clients, because we often found out things before our competitors, just because the press are at press conferences, they hear things first, and then we were able to disseminate that information to clients.
Well, welcome to you, Alex. And sitting alongside me is Alison Wilson, who's definitely got the work-life balance sorted. You may have noticed that you're just slightly pregnant at the moment with your second child. So congratulations to you. And Managing Associate of Litigation, and I think you advise both retail investment banking clients on litigation and enforcement matters. It sounds quite serious.
Yeah, it can be quite serious, particularly for them when they end up with a big fine from the FSA, but obviously now FCA, that's what we're trying to avoid. So litigation, you all understand, disputes going through courts, that sort of thing, whereas the contentious regulatory side of our practice is an area that's growing a lot at the moment. Regulators are becoming increasingly active both in the UK and abroad, and a large part of what we do is defending mostly banking clients, but also insurers and hedge funds and other similar financial institutions from regulatory investigations in all sorts of spheres.
Welcome to you, Alison, and thank you very much for being part of the panel. And last but not least, sitting on the end is Andrew Marshall, who's a senior professional support lawyer. And now you look after the technical training of the firm's banking lawyers around the world. If people aren't familiar with the technical side of it, just explain to us what that's about.
Yes, of course, and good evening, everyone. I'd realised actually on the way in that it was 6 years ago today that I joined Linklaters from being a banking and finance lawyer in Australia for many years. And these days I'm responsible for the technical training of our lawyers and indeed our clients. So I suppose for the juniors amongst people that would be the fundamentals about things like what would you put into a loan agreement or how might you structure a guarantee. But increasingly also we see a great deal of interest from our clients about some of the softer skills training that we give to them as well. So I spent Monday down with some of the lawyers at Barclays here in London to talk to them about how they can write their agreements most effectively.
So that's our panellists. I'm going to go to our first question in just a moment. And we're here about commercial awareness. And let's just frame the topic at the moment. Because why do we want students, and that's our main audience, to think about and appreciate commercial awareness? Who's going to take that one?
It's absolutely fundamental to understanding why our clients want the advice from us. So we really need to understand what drives their businesses.
So it's really important and very imperative. So it's going to be a great evening. So thank you very much for taking part in it. And I'm delighted to say that the first person to ask the question, I'm looking for Holly, who's from the University of Leeds. Holly, over to you.
As it is important that lawyers are able to give sound advice to clients both from a legal and business perspective, how can lawyers refine these skills in order to provide pragmatic solutions for clients?
Alex.
Thank you. Great question. Well, it is really important. And actually, one of the things that we do for people as soon as they join Linklaters as a trainee is there's a program called the Global Lawyers Orientation Program. And that one of the first courses you go on is about commercial awareness. It's about commercial drivers understanding the client's business. Why are they asking us for the advice in the first place? And if we don't understand that, we're not going to give them the advice they need. And so I've been doing this course actually for the last 3-4 years. And we talk about all the different sectors we operate in. So we try and get people to understand what is it the banks are doing, what are the issues they're dealing with at the moment, how are they coping in the market we're in. We look at insurance companies, private equity houses, food and beverage companies, all sorts. And the idea is to really focus on what it's like to be that client. And then we talk about the sorts of tips there are out there. What do you do? How do you read the FT? Nobody reads the FT from front to back. I certainly don't. I don't think any of my colleagues do. And it's just about learning. Find something you're actually interested in. It might be about bankers' pay. It might be about health and safety issues in energy companies. I don't know. But just find something you like and read about that. And every time you see an article about it, read about that and get to know it. And then it will get you into other areas that you enjoy. And I think that's a much easier way of sort of getting under the skin of clients and understanding them.
Because when we look back to when we were students, which for some of us is quite a long time ago, we certainly weren't the finished articles, were we? So it's not about putting the fear in people as well. It's about saying it is achievable, getting commercial awareness. Andrew, anything you want to add to that?
Actually, just as Alex was speaking, it reminded me of my favourite movie, which is American Pie. Some of you might have seen before, because there's a...
This is going.
Yeah, no, indeed. There's a character in that who says he's desperate to get a girlfriend, and he says, I think I've discovered the solution. All you have to do is ask them questions and listen to what they say. And one of his friends says, I don't know, that sounds like a lot of work. Which is one of the reasons why I like it, because going back to Alex's point, which is to increase our commercial awareness, we have to talk to our clients, but we do have to do two things, and that is to ask them questions, which doesn't come naturally to a lawyer who always wants to provide a solution. And then the second thing we can always forget is to listen to what they say and reflect that back to them.
Yeah.
And I think staying close to clients is really, really important. And a lot of people here at the firm have had opportunities to go off on secondment. And when you're on secondment in the client, you really become embedded and you really understand their business and what makes them tick, how decisions are made in their organisation. And then when you come back from secondment, then you can use the contacts that you've made to, have just coffees and lunches and catch-ups, and then you actually find out on a continuing basis what's going on in their organisation, and that's really key.
So that was a great question. Thank you very much to Holly for that first question. We're now going to go to our second question, and it comes from Andrea, who's a student at the University of Cambridge. Good evening to you, Andrea.
Hi. Recently, Linklaters has announced the opening of a new office in Seoul. What commercial issues does Linklaters have to consider when entering a new legal market, and how does it adapt to new business and legal cultures?
Great question. Thank you very much, Andrea. So what commercial issues does Linklaters have to consider when entering a new legal market, and how does it adapt to new business and legal cultures? Tom, can you take that one?
Sure. Thanks very much for the question. We consider this from time to time. It's often driven by what it should be driven by is what are our clients doing? Why is it relevant for us to be in any particular market, and what's the value that we can add? So the first question is, why are we doing it? Why is it necessary for us to do? Personally, we've developed a model to help us guide, a framework to guide that decision. We look at primary, secondary, and tertiary markets. Primary markets are those where we think actually clients are asking us to be there. It's important for us to be there, and we see clear revenue opportunities. Secondary markets are those where we see clear revenue opportunities, but actually what we can control our investment in equity and actually provide adequate coverage from places where we have offices. So in that first bucket, we'll consider opening an office where there's clear client demand, where there's clear revenue opportunities, and we think that by having a presence in the market, we can actually further the global footprint of the firm and actually deliver greater value across a number of different areas. In the third area of markets are where we'll likely partner with others or will from time to time provide coverage. So that's just why are we there? Do we see clear revenue opportunities? Well, what are the commercial issues we have to consider? Well, we have the same commercial constraints that many of our clients do. We have to look at what's our source of revenue, what's our cost base, where's it coming from, and how do we maximize those things. For example, you take the Korea example, you can say, well, actually, that was a decision that manifested itself recently, but actually we've been looking at Korea for probably 10 years or so. It started with a partner, Sang Lee, who was well connected in Korea, based in Hong Kong, and he started to develop a practice there, mainly focused on M&A, private equity. Started to see that there was a real opportunity there from a client perspective. Korean corporates were starting to look outside, so we got more and more familiar with them as they were looking for investments in Europe, and we did a number of deals there. That was taken over by a partner named Hyung An, who's a personal friend of mine, who has run that team out of Hong Kong and has built a lot of expertise amongst local Koreans who've trained as U.S. lawyers as well. So not only are we providing U.S. law, but Korean law in the jurisdiction, and we thought actually there's a real business need. So we decided to develop that team to a state where we thought actually we'll go ahead and invest in the office. The market was opening up. There were licenses to be had, and so we've taken advantage of that because we see a future revenue opportunity. And then, of course, you have to match your cost size to your cost base to match that. So we have invested in there the right amount of equity, the right amount of associates to provide us with enough coverage to be able to get to the clients, to do the work. But we also leverage it on a regional basis. So we work with our Hong Kong offices and throughout in order to develop those relationships. So again, our commercial drivers are no different than our clients. It's just that we approach it on a basis of we're derivative of what our clients do and where we see activity. So those are the principal things that will drive our decisions.
And David, if I can bring you in as well, when you've looked at the last few years, the BRICS have been, everybody's been talking about them, so Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. I'm picking up that the civets is the next big thing. So that's talking about Colombia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and so on, Turkey. And when you think about those countries that will gain prominence in the years ahead, how do Linklaters sort of tackle those future growing markets? Indonesia, for example, is going to be in the top 10 in the next few years in terms of GDP around the world.
I would say that, actually touching on what Tom's just said, we already probably have a lot of these different jurisdictions in mind, and no doubt are doing lots of work there, albeit probably on a regional basis, or being able to cover client requirements from other matters. But we need to be able to consider whether it makes sense and the timing at which we may actually want to deploy our resources to then go and get on the ground. And that will be a completely changing environment depending on what our clients may want, depending on what the profile of the relevant jurisdiction itself is from time to time.
And in fact, the next question is closely connected with that, and I'd like to go to Maurice, who's from the London School of Economics, or the LSE, for the third question. Maurice, where are you? Welcome to you.
What will change in the nature of litigation with the growth of business in non-Western cultures?
Now, litigation, I think, Alison, that should be your one.
Well, obviously, I think this is an interesting question, being a litigator. And I think there's three sort of key things that I wanted to focus on. And forgive the fact that I've written them down, but with baby brain, I have to write everything down at the moment. So I think one of the key things is that where you've got cross-border disputes, most people don't litigate, or often they tend to arbitrate, particularly where they're in new economies. And the two key arbitral institutions are in London and New York, which is obviously not great if you're looking perhaps in the Asian markets. So I think over the next 10 years or so, we'll probably see an increase in the prominence and market share of arbitral institutions in those Asian markets themselves, so particularly Hong Kong and Singapore, I think. Obviously, with arbitration then comes a question about how you actually enforce an arbitral award. And China is a massively growing economy, and that's no news to anybody here. But two main problems with China from a litigation perspective. The first is actually enforcing arbitral awards, and the second is the court system. Nobody particularly wants to use the Chinese courts for a variety of reasons. But then you've got your international arbitration award, and how do you actually enforce it? So I think probably what we'll see is not necessarily a change in the Chinese court system, but we might well see an increase in opportunities to enforce arbitral awards. One of the other things that our litigation practice gets involved in a lot is advice on bribery and corruption, and obviously those are problems that can occur in any economy and do occur in any economy, but they're particularly focuses perhaps when you're looking at some of the newer economies. And so we're finding that lots of our UK and US-based clients are facing increasing numbers of investigations, perhaps in relation to FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and also the UK Bribery Act. And that's touching on business that they're doing in those other jurisdictions. So we're increasingly advising on that type of thing.
And Alison, I suppose the reason why you've mentioned that is that the UK and US have been put there as a test, really, for the Anti-Bribery Act at the moment. It's not because there are more cases in those countries.
Yeah.
They're there to lead the way, aren't they? And it has been a very difficult law for companies to abide by, hasn't it?
That's right, because it's a sort of domestic law which then impinges on the business they do across the world, and that makes it very, very challenging for companies domiciled over here. And then the last thing probably is about contentious regulatory work. I mentioned at the beginning that that's an area I do a lot of. But the financial services regulators are increasingly sort of flexing their muscles, baring their teeth in jurisdictions over in Asia, and that's where we'll see a lot of growth, I think, in the years to come.
Who else wants to chip in on that one?
Well, I mean, just picking up on the impact of the FCPA, UK Bribery Act. So, for example, a lot of my practice, think a New York lawyer based in London. Actually, a big part of my practice is down in South Africa, for example, advising companies on compliance with these issues. And these are very much the issues of the day for our clients and the general counsels about how to implement appropriate governance structures and frameworks to ensure that there's compliance all across their global operations. And actually that's, I think, a unique point of being in a firm like Linklaters, of being able to pull people from different international backgrounds, from different disciplines, and have them brought to bear, because you wouldn't think normally a corporate lawyer would be leading on investigative work in respect of this area, but actually working alongside with our litigation colleagues in New York and Vanessa Harvard Williams here in London, who's one of our partners. Actually, we can bring to bear a lot of our skills in ways which we haven't before, again, picking up on the trend of increased enforcement and attention on this area.
So how does this all relate to students, though? How can they get an understanding of this if they're thinking about becoming a lawyer? So, what should they be looking out for? Because this sounds quite technical and complex. I mean, it sounds like you need a certain level of expertise in order to be able to handle some of the cases that you're talking about: compliance, risk, governance, everything that goes with it.
Well, I think a lot of the cases that we're talking about are things that have been in the papers. So you've seen lots of companies, I don't want to name any names in case I inadvertently trip up any clients, but there's chemical clients, there's clients in the electronics sector have all been facing lots of these types of investigations, and they're front page news in most newspapers. So I think it's something that is actually relatively easy to keep a handle on from a student's perspective.
Well, thank you very much for that question. We've now got question number 4, and I'm going to go to Christopher, who's from the King's College in London. Good evening to you, Christopher.
Hi, good evening. Imagination is one of the 6 core values of Linklaters, but in my experience studying law so far, I don't see this being used very often, maybe except by the judiciary. So how does Linklaters not just value imagination, but exercise it in their practice of law as well?
What a great question, and I think we're going to give it to David Phillips.
Superb. Certainly imagination, one of our key core values. Actually, in practice, I think that we will utilise imagination and innovation in pretty much every matter that we advise upon. If I give you an overview of sort of life cycle of a matter, client will come to us saying, I want to achieve this, or at least maybe they think they want to achieve X, but they don't quite know how they're going to get from X to Y, and that's where we come in. That's also why having a bit of commercial awareness about what makes the client tick helps us actually drive them in the right direction, and then you work together side by side with the client to try and give a structural effectively procedure to get them through to where they need to be. Now, we don't always start out at the outset and say, this is how we're going to do it. And most of the time, whenever the clients come to ask us to do something, it may not have a clear answer on how you're going to get there. And that's why Linklaters tends to advise on lots of first of deals or most complex new elements, just because we get presented with very tricky issues. That also makes it quite fun. It means that we get to actually be able to innovate. We get to be able to be at the leading edge of our relative practice areas. And I'm sure there are various matters that will evidence this across the whole panel. If I draw on my own practice within the derivatives world, Linklaters has been at the forefront of all developments that have gone through. If I pick from, I don't know, corporate, Glencore IPO, massive transaction, lots of novel and new issues to pick up. If we go to Lehman's, we're synonymous with assisting in the Lehman's administration. Actually, on the point of imagination, the FT Innovative Awards, they recognised our work there. That's a great accolade for the firm, but it's just representative of the actual innovation, imagination, general skill set that we need to bring to advise our clients.
So Alex, it's not just about being reactive, is it then? If you're using imagination, it's about coming up with ideas and taking them to your clients rather than you waiting for that call to come through.
That's absolutely right. I mean, we see an issue coming and I pick up the phone to a client and I tell them, look, this is about to happen. To give them the heads up, make sure they realise that they're about to get a call from someone in the business telling them, what are you doing about this? And I can start to give them ideas about what I hear in the market, what sorts of things they can be thinking about.
Because it's quite a tough value, isn't it, to come up with imagination.
Yeah, but that's what they want from us.
Yeah, and you're delivering that, would you say?
I would say on that the best thing about imagination is actually you see it evidenced by people at all levels across the firm. So when we think of imagination, you might think of the most senior or the oldest partner sitting in a room thinking about a difficult way to get through a knotty legal problem. But actually some of the students like yourselves who come to join the firm and then within their first 2 weeks are tasked with closing a deal, signing a transaction, and all of a sudden somebody's not available or somebody's stuck in a jury or they've missed their flight, and they have to find a way to make sure that the deal happens. And we see fantastic examples of imagination from bright young people all the time, just as much as we do on the legal things from our seniors.
I think we're constantly brainstorming in our team, and it's always, I mean, I have a trainee sitting in my room and I'm constantly asking her what she thinks about a particular issue, and we will have internal meetings just to discuss things, because we want to try and create the best solutions and you know, think of something before someone else does.
And that keeps it very fresh then, the perspective, doesn't it? And it's just trying to be as diverse as possible. And not diversity doesn't necessarily come in experience, it can come in with fresh ideas and imagination. So very interesting question. Thank you very much for that one. Our fifth question is actually from Luke, who's from the University of Warwick. Luke can't be with us tonight, but he is with us online. So as a result, I'm going to ask his question on his behalf. So I hope I do it justice. So this is Luke's question. Now, over the next few years, which of your leading practice areas do you predict will change and why, based on the current economic climate? Andrew, that's one for you.
Okay, good. Very good question. Thank you, Luke. Perhaps to start with the why, regulation is one of the things that you've heard us touch on quite a lot over the course of the last half an hour. And I think that's something that's changed. When a lot of us were sitting where you are now, the buzzword for us was deregulation. I mean, it happened everywhere. We were talking about privatising industries. We were talking about a real letting go of red tape that will allow economies to grow and people to create wealth. And everything seemed to be moving in that direction. And it's amazing how swiftly in the last few years that has changed. And to give you some examples, I mean, obviously banks, some of them potentially more constrained these days in how much they're able to lend, but then they're also being encouraged to lend in other ways. So how do they do that? Some of them, for example, with my colleagues upstairs, have just been pouring through loan documents that they are looking at for various banks to transfer to other banks to help free up that bank's balance sheet. So regulation will impact on banking, certainly, as you'd expect, but also upon the corporate teams who need to sell parts of banks to anywhere else, in our litigation teams, in our employment teams and the like. And I know regulation would have touched on the experiences of everyone across the panel here.
Yep, who wants to come in on that? Tom?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is the driving force of many things that are going on, is the fact that there is a greater regulatory and I'd also say enforcement environment as well. I think those are two big changes. And I think what we historically would have kind of kept in different silos of litigation, FRG, banking, corporate, actually what we see ourselves debating these days is whether we need to have a risk division, a division that actually pulls together all the disparate elements in order to help our clients identify, manage, and mitigate risk. In some respects, people might use the word elimination. As a corporate lawyer, I don't use that because I don't think risk elimination is actually an element which is relevant for our clients. It's about managing risk and accepting risk. And I think, the more and more that we work together, we understand the environments that our clients work in, the better, more effective solutions we can have. And I think the big change in the way people think about this is that these changes are not single disciplinary advisory areas. You have to bring into bear many different perspectives in order to solve our clients' issues, and that's just a mirror of the world they face. The number of stakeholders, the number of people who are coming at them from different perspectives, the number of things that they have to manage requires us operating in a very similar way.
And I suppose when you think about risk and all the crises that happen, there's always a backstory, and the attempt to manage risk is about trying to look at that backstory. So whenever you think about, say, for example, Terminal 5, when that opened, I don't know if you remember that, and the debacle behind the luggage not working, it's because the systems weren't put in place properly. The risk hadn't properly been identified. So it's trying to identify those risks, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But I mean, it's like anything else. It's like economics. You know, everything is history. And you learn from what you've gone through before and try to apply it in a different context. And I think it's the same thing in terms of risk management. You have to learn from what people have seen before, what people have experienced, what you've experienced, and then think a little bit outside of the box, going back to the imagination question. It's not just being presented with a set of facts and saying this is the answer. It's trying to kind of game theory it to see what the answers could be if all things go a little pear-shaped. And so it takes a multidiscipline.
Tom, you had a very interesting point about understanding your clients. So, David, from your point of view, how do you go about understanding your clients? You're not just all sat here in your office day in, day out, and we've talked about people going on secondments, getting an understanding of their clients, their businesses. How does that actually work in reality? I mean, how much time do you get access to your clients and get to work with them face-to-face?
I spend more than 50% of a day speaking to a client. That may be face-to-face, it may be on the phone, but ultimately you understand intimately. You spend an awful lot of time talking with these people. You spend an awful lot of time understanding what the drivers are and the motivating factors to get them actually through to fruition at the end of their transaction, and where the pressures internally are being placed on that client. One of the beauties of secondment is that you actually get in and you get to understand why the client might give you an instruction in a particular way. It's not because he wants to wait until Friday night whenever he's going to send you something and then he's going to disappear off on his weekend. Actually, instead, it's just that there are lots of different sections within, say, a bank that all have to give their input, and it may be that he is getting pressure or he only gets his end instructions at that time. Understanding why that happens makes it much easier to actually interact with your clients and ultimately provide good service.
Andrew, it's talking about sailing with the wind as well. The question asked, what areas will change and why? What areas will change and why? Obviously, there's huge mega trends going on at the moment, whether it's demographics, that shift to other emerging countries as they play their part in the world. So what do you predict will change?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think going back to Tom's point about how traditionally law firms, I suppose, have been seen as quite siloed between different departments, which is an obvious result of scale. If you grow to the size that we do, then inevitably people will end up specialising. But these days, our clients expect from us a working knowledge across different departments and issues, and also across different jurisdictions, and that's one of the key things that all of our lawyers try to demonstrate wherever possible. They don't necessarily have to be an expert in a particular area, but they have to be at least capable enough to have that first conversation with the client to be able to say, that's a good point, here are my initial views, we'll get some of our experts in that to call you back. So to a certain extent, I'd see the change as being not within each particular division, but actually across those different divisions and different departments as people become more bilingual, you might say, about other departments or indeed other offices and regions as well.
Well, those are the 5 questions. Thank you very much for submitting those and asking those as well. And thank you to Luke, who's watching online. That's the end of our questions. I'm now going to invite Francesca Scott on stage. And Francesca is a student at Bristol University. And she actually won our competition last year. And she's kindly agreed to tell us a little bit about her time and her trip with Linklaters to their Hong Kong office. And she won the competition last year, but the trip actually took place this year in July. So please give a very warm welcome to Francesca.
Good evening, and firstly, thank you very much, Linklaters, for inviting me back here this evening. As I'm sure you can imagine, this time last year, I was thrilled to hear my question about commercial awareness answered live by the panel and to win the prize of a trip to Hong Kong. Just some highlights of my trip. I had an absolutely brilliant time with a day in the Linklaters office, a visit to the Hong Kong Refugee Advice Centre, and a weekend of sightseeing. During my time in the office, an afternoon of work shadowing in the litigation department offered an insight into the types of deals and clients with which Linklaters is involved. The emphasis on continued expansion in the Asian market was clear, as were the opportunities for travel and the fact that the work itself often crosses multiple jurisdictions. I met several trainees at different stages of their training contracts, including several on secondment from London. Everybody was very friendly, willing to answer all my questions and to offer an insight into working life in Hong Kong. It became evident that the firm truly is international. I also visited the Hong Kong Refugee Advice Centre, an NGO supported by Linklaters. I learned about the complicated legal situation of refugees in Hong Kong and how crucial informed legal representation and legal aid is for those seeking official refugee status under UN law. In addition, I had plenty of free time to sightsee, visiting a traditional night market, the island of Lantau and Victoria Peak, which has stunning views of the city. I'm sure anyone who's been to Hong Kong will know. Overall, it was an incredible competition prize, thanks to which I learnt more about the firm's international practice, the Hong Kong legal market, and the work done by the Refugee Advice Centre. So congratulations in advance to this year's winner. My advice would be to ask plenty of questions and to enjoy every minute in Dubai, as it really is a unique opportunity. Thank you.
Francesca. Thank you, Francesca. And it sounds like you had an absolutely fantastic trip and gained some great insight into what it was like to work for Linklaters. So thank you very much for sharing that story with us. I'd now like to invite Jennifer Cook, who's the Linklaters Recruitment Manager for Graduates, to announce the winner of this year's competition for 2013. So please welcome Jennifer Cook.
Well, good evening, everyone, and I'm absolutely delighted to announce this year's winner. The winning question was, what will change in the nature of litigation with the growth of business in non-Western cultures? So congratulations to Maurice from LSE. If you'd like to come forward and collect your prize. Congratulations. And for everyone else that asked a question tonight, we've also got a little something for you as well. So if you see me afterwards, then you can collect your envelope.
Thank you to Jennifer and well done to Maurice. And we can't wait to hear about your trip to Dubai. So congratulations to you. I don't know if you want to say a couple of words. Have the microphone. No. I know it's probably unprepared, but what have you got to say?
Well, I'm quite excited about going to Dubai, particularly because...
Quite excited or very?
No, quite excited.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I thought I'm quite pleased because also it might actually answer my question in a very physical sense, because Islamic finance is, it's big news at the moment. I'd like to actually see it in practice. So, it's quite excited.
Well, congratulations to you once more. Thank you to Jennifer Cook and also to our winner for 2013, Maurice. Well done, Maurice. Well, that brings us to an end to this part of this evening. I'd like to thank our panellists here tonight, David, Tom, Alex, Alison and Andrew, for their contributions and insights. I'd also like to take this opportunity to remind our online audience that they should stay online for our next session, which starts immediately after this, where your questions will be answered via our audio link. We really do appreciate and value your feedback. So again, on your screens, you'll be able to submit your feedback to us, and that really does help shape future events. So if you can do that, that'd be most appreciated. And the appropriate button is on the top of your screen. Now, for those of you who are in the studio, we're asking your feedback as well, and you're going to be sent an email with that information. So please, again, do fill out the feedback. Again, it helps Linklaters shape future events. Now, an on-demand version of this event will be made available via a link on the Linklaters Careers website homepage, and that will be coming very soon. So let me close by saying thank you again to our panellists. Big round of applause for them. Thank you. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.
Welcome along to our online audience. Thank you very much for staying tuned. Hope you've enjoyed the first part of this evening with our panel. My name's Sharon Jacobs. I work in the graduate recruitment team, and I'm delighted to have our audio panel with us now. So to introduce them, we have Simon Brannigan, who is a partner in our corporate practice, and Kitty Lloyd, counsel in our capital markets. And would you like to introduce yourselves a little bit further as well?
Hello, I'm Kitty Lloyd and I'm counsel in capital markets, as Sharon said, and I've been at Linklaters for about 21 years, and I joined as a trainee and then I qualified into the corporate department where I advised on M&A and sort of equities, IPO type transactions, and then about 8 years ago I moved to capital markets and I now advise trustees and custodians on bond issues across the world.
I should say that given that we're online and no one can see our faces, Kitty doesn't look nearly old enough to have been here for 21 years. I'm Simon Brannigan. As Sharon said, I'm a partner in the corporate department here in the London office of Linklaters. I do all aspects of corporate work, so private M&A, public M&A, joint ventures, capital raisings. I also have the privilege of being one of the 2 London graduate recruitment partners and helping to support our fantastic graduate recruitment team.
Thanks very much, Simon, and thank you, Kitty, also for your introduction. We've got about 20 minutes now that we're going to run the audio panel, and I can see lots of your questions coming in, so thank you all for that. Not sure we'll quite get through all of them, but thank you very much. We're going to pick out a few, and we've had lots of really interesting questions coming in already from students. One that I'd like to pick out now from Alex. The question is, how has the current economic climate affected your respective practice areas, and in what ways have you adapted to confront these challenges? So, Simon, are you happy to kick that one off?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I say, I'm in the corporate department. I suppose since the economic crisis happened back in 2008-09, the M&A market has tended to plummet somewhat. That hasn't quite been the case for all of us here at Linklaters. We act for a lot of our large banking clients, a lot of large financial institutions, such as the Royal Bank of Scotland, Lloyds, and others, which have seen their fair share of trouble over the last few years. And so I guess the theoretical answer ought to be that my practice should have been really quite badly affected by the financial crisis, in that there should be a lot less work. Actually, there's been more work as a result of some of our largest clients having been in trouble and looking to us to help them get out of that trouble.
And I think certain areas have definitely seen an upturn in work as well. Kitty, were you going to jump in there as well?
When I joined as a trustee lawyer about 8 years ago, that was at the top of the sort of boom market of CDOs. And then very soon afterwards, Lehman happened, and the type of work that I would be involved in for a trustee changed quite a lot in terms of if a bond issue goes wrong and the issuer of the bonds can't pay the interest on it because they're in financial difficulties, that would be a default under the bond issue. So quite a lot of my clients have been involved in actually working through restructurings and defaults on companies that have got into financial difficulty. But interestingly, not nearly as many as I think people first thought when Lehman first went down. And actually, we're extremely busy on new bond issues across the work, and we often find that the emerging markets in particular are very busy at the moment.
And actually, outside of Kitty's practice and my practice, more broadly, some of the firm's areas which are most busy because of the financial crisis has been our litigation department. Unsurprisingly, when you've got a financial crisis, people look around to see if they've lost money, who they can sue. Our financial regulatory group, which is one of the leading financial regulatory groups in the city, is incredibly busy as a result of the huge swathe of legislation that's come out as a result of the financial crisis. And of course our restructuring and insolvency team has never been busier for the obvious reasons. So I think that's how both Kitty's practice and my practice has been affected, but also more broadly how the rest of the firm is shaping up as a result of the crisis.
Thanks very much, both. We've had a fair few number of questions coming in along a similar theme, so I think it might be a good one to tackle. Essentially, I know lots of you seem to be interested in how, as a student, you can go about learning more about commercial awareness, and in particular, what sort of sources you can look to. And I think from my perspective in graduate recruitment, and as the panel already mentioned earlier, we're not expecting you to read the FT from cover to cover every day by any means, but Simon and Kitty, perhaps you've got some ideas of what the students can be doing to brush up on their commercial awareness in advance of perhaps coming in for an interview with us.
I mean, I think for me, people have to have a genuine interest in the wider commercial world. There's little point in handing someone a copy of The Economist or the Financial Times or any newspaper, or going onto any website and saying, read this, learn it, and try and absorb as much information as possible before an interview. It just won't quite work. I think people have to have a genuine interest in it. But having said that, I think the way to do it is actually to keep abreast of news stories that are current by picking up those publications, by reading articles in The Economist. It is focusing on areas that may be of interest to you, whether it's a particular country, whether it's a particular sector of the market. If people are interested in the banks that have been in crisis in the UK over the last few years, whether it's a recent scandal in the Co-op. Lots of stories that are a lot more interesting than what people might at first might think. And certainly when I was a student, the thought of reading The Economist or reading the FT was certainly the last thing in my mind. But if you hone in on particular stories or topics that will pique your interest, I think that's the way to do it.
Yes, and I think also it just helps to talk to people who might be in the world of work, or for instance friends who've just graduated or gone to work for a bank, not just necessarily to a law firm, and just talking to them about what it is that they're working with clients on and what are the areas that they're interested in and are important to them, because actually you find out a lot about a business by talking to the people who are involved in it at whatever level.
Definitely, and I think picking up on Simon's point about those things that you're interested in, that really comes across at interview, doesn't it? Simon's already mentioned his graduate recruitment partner. Kitty's on our interview panel as well, and I know that when students talk enthusiastically about things that are actually of interest to you, then that really comes across rather than throwing around jargon that you think is going to be helpful. So that's definitely a tip from our side.
I think just one further tip for those who may be coming for interview, it's not just I suppose being enthusiastic about a particular topic, but I think those students who really stand out in interviews on the commercial awareness side are those who will relate wider commercial stories to our business, i.e. what we as a law firm do. We are a business like any other business. We are impacted directly by events that are going on in the wider world, whether it be in the UK, in Europe or elsewhere. And the really standout candidates are those who A, show enthusiasm for the commercial world, B, are able to talk about particular stories in some detail, but with great enthusiasm, and finally those who are able to say how that might impact our business.
Thank you both. Another question that's come through, it's quite interesting, your question, what is the biggest challenge of working on multi-jurisdictional deals? Kitty, have you got any insights there?
I think one is the time zones, and actually I think London is very well placed for that, because you can work on a deal which might involve LA and Asia, or another jurisdiction on another completely different time zone, but actually we're sort of in the middle, so I think that really helps in terms of working on a multi-jurisdictional transaction and understanding where people are coming from in terms of their demands and what they need to do and their attitudes and what they need to deal with. But I think it really helps when we're working in a firm like Linklaters, because we have contacts across the network of Linklaters with New York, Sao Paulo, the Far East, in Russia. So we can talk to our colleagues and help, and that really helps get a multi-jurisdictional transaction done when you're all working together and you're all working for the same aim and you know each other. You've worked together for a lot of times and you've come across each other, and that helps really smooth the transaction along.
I think something's probably bound up in that also, Kitty, would you agree, is about the cultural sensitivities. So by knowing your colleagues in the different jurisdictions, and different countries may operate in different ways, and have you got any insights there as well?
Definitely. I mean, I was lucky enough as a trainee to spend some time in Hong Kong, and I think the thing I really appreciated and valued from that experience was just how the clients and the whole environment of Hong Kong worked, which was quite different at the time from London in terms of how deals would close or just things like that, and it was a great experience.
Great, thank you. A question that's just come through from Oliver, thanks very much for that, is how do you manage to keep your reputation as one of the very best law firms around? So I think obviously there are lots of fantastic law firms out there with client bases that are similar to ours, and obviously with Linklaters we have the ambition of being the leading global law firm. So I think the question here really is, how do we keep that reputation and really stand out from the crowd?
I think it starts actually here and now with recruitment. The only way that you can be the leading global law firm, which as Sharon said is our ambition, unashamed ambition, is to recruit and retain the very best people. So law firm is nothing but its people. Those are effectively the only assets that we have. And so I think we've managed to keep our reputation because of the people that we recruit year on year, by spending the time and the resources and the energy in recruiting the very, very best people in the legal market, people who will share our vision and our values. And I think it is also by helping to create a working environment and a culture where people are looked after, where they are given the very best training in the market, where they are encouraged, they are trained through every stage of their career so that they are much better prepared, I think, than their peers in all of our competitor law firms. And I think it's a result of all of that, and of course the amazing work that we continue to do for all of our clients, I think has helped to maintain our reputation at the very top of the market.
Kitty, anything you wanted to add there as well?
No, I absolutely echo Simon's view, is that it's really important to recruit the right people, and it's the people that make the firm. Absolutely.
So I think that probably brings us quite nicely to time for just one final question. Ivan has just sent this question in, and he has asked, what is your motivation to work for Linklaters? So Simon, why don't we start with you on that one?
I suppose I could give you the official answer, which is that it's the cutting-edge work, it's the deals that are the front page of the newspapers all the time that we work on. Actually, I can sum it up in 2 words, which is people care. And what do I mean by that? By that I mean that people care about the work that they do. There are incredibly high standards here. After 15 years, I still feel enormously privileged to work in a place like this. There is an amazing level of talent at all levels, from the most junior to the most senior. So people care about the work that they do with their high standards. They care about the clients they work for, and probably more importantly than anything, they care about their colleagues. So there is no point in coming into the office every day and saying you're doing cutting-edge work and you work in a market-leading practice or a market-leading law firm if actually you don't enjoy the people that you work with and the clients that you work for. And so certainly what's got me out of bed every day for the last 15 years has primarily been the people that I work with.
Yes, I'd absolutely second that. I think the people are so important to the way the firm works, and it's a real honour to work here. And I think also that the work is very interesting. It's very varied. Whatever we're doing, it could be cutting edge, and it's very exciting to work in that environment with a very collegiate atmosphere. It's a bit like being at university with really intelligent people who you get on with and are all aiming for the same thing. It's a great place.
Thank you both, and we really hope that with tonight's event you've been able to catch a bit of a glimpse of not just the work that we do and the types of things that we need to think about for our clients, but also some of our people and hearing from them directly. So we really hope that you've enjoyed the event. Kitty and Simon, thank you very much for making up our audio panel. Thanks to all of our online audience. You'll also be able to watch the whole event again, should you wish, on the website in the next few days, so look out for that, and we hope to meet you again at future events. Thanks very much.